The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and merry part, bright the cheeks and warm the heart. For tread the circle thrice about, to keep unwelcome spirits out. Bide within the law you must, in perfect love and perfect trust. Mind the threefold laws you should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. These 8 words the read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, tonight we're going to be talking with Nancy Hendrickson about her new book, Ancestral Grimoire. Now, she's the author of Ancestral Tarot. Her public works include several books that combine tarot skills with the deep ancestral work as well. Her published work includes several genealogy books and magazine articles. She writes many different types of divination, including tarot decks of the past, and well as tarot from a cultural perspective, which is so neat. I mean, all these things are coming into me that they're fresh that I've never heard about. So I'm really anxious to talk with her. So if anyone has any questions in the chat room, fire away. And if you're listening live and have a question or a comment, just pop over to paraxradionetwork.com. All right, Nancy, welcome.
Hey, Marla, thank you so much for the invite. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, from the moment I opened the book, it was quite clear that you put your heart and soul into this very unique book. It's about sharing ancestral wisdom with the assistance of the tarot. How did this book come to pass?
Oh, that is such a great question. Well, as you know, I did write Ancestral Tarot mostly because I've spent my entire life working with both the ancestors and with tarot. But after I'd written Ancestral Tarot, it occurred to me one day, and it was like the penny dropped, that all of us in this mystical, magical community are not here coincidentally. And I thought, you know what? I actually think we all had magical ancestors. We just never thought about it that way. I just don't think we would be drawn to the work we do unless it's part of our bloodline. And by bloodline, it could be your bloodline in this life or your bloodline in another life. It really doesn't matter. But you come to this naturally. And so I really wanted to look at different types of magical skills and work out a way that a reader could, throughout the entire year, try one type of magic versus another type, and just to see what really is my most powerful magic. And that's really how the book came about.
Mm. Well, you know, the subtitle of the book is Create Your Personal Book of Shadows. But, you know, we're talking about the Grimoire and the Book of Shadows. So I have to bring up this confusion that people have, and me too, about the definitions of grimoires and the Book of Shadows, because there are those who adamantly say that they're not the same thing, that a Book of Shadows is a spell book handed down to a person from generation, blah, 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 whereas a grimoire is for everybody. You know, any thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I also got, I also gave that a lot of thought. And, you know, when you do a book, parts of the book are out of your control as an author. And part of that is the name of the book and the tagline of the book. Now, I use Book of Shadows and Grimoire interchangeably. And I know a lot of people don't and kind of give me a hard time for it. But for me personally, I do use them interchangeably.
Okay. Yeah, because, one of the things was, well, a spell book is a book of shadows, and maybe some notes here and
Right.
there, and then here we
Right.
come with the grimoire, which is, a free-for-all. There's so many things in there.
And the way, and excuse me for
No.
interrupting you, the way I think about it is if you do the work in Ancestral Grimoire, you're actually going to have in your possession a book like absolutely no one else on the planet has, because it is specific to your family lines.
Mm-hmm.
Again, whether this life or another life. So even if you were doing this book and your sister did this book, or your cousin, they would be totally different one from the other. And I like that thought that we are creating something that is simply us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the book is a guide to connect with our ancestors through the tarot and oracles and magic. And I love the quote in your introduction that says, "We're all born magicians who have forgotten our magic."
Thank you. I can't even, thank you for bringing that up, because it's one of the phrases that came to me really early, like maybe day 1 or 2 of starting this book. And I realized we all have this incredible magical ability. We just have forgotten it. And I think we know it when we're very little.
Mm-hmm.
As we're children, nothing is impossible.
Right.
I mean, that's how we think, that nothing's impossible. And we forget that as we age. And so thank you for pointing that out. I actually loved writing that, because it felt so true to me.
Well, it is. And, you talk about magical skills carried through generations in our DNA, and you validate that quote often throughout the book. So thank you for reminding us that, we've forgotten and all that, and that we're getting the opportunity to get it back. See, that's what's so important. It's lost, but not completely gone.
Yes, absolutely.
Got one question from chat room. She wants to know, she says, what are the signs that show that we're connected to a particular ancestor in a magical or psychic manner?
Well, that's why if you don't have the book, the second half of the book goes January through December. And it has you actually using tarot or a pendulum or other divination tools. It has you actually meet an ancestor who excelled at a specific skill. Mm-hmm. So as you go through each month and do the exercises, trust me, you are going to know immediately who you are connected to and what that power is. And, what I can say is I'm asking you to have a little bit of faith that you actually will know, you will feel it, because it feels like you got into the right skin. Mm-hmm. That's the best I can answer that question.
No, and you mentioned, talking about working with the ancestors that we've never met. And there are a great many of them. I mean, people say we have thousands of ancestors that we never met, and we only
millions,
know.
Actually, millions.
Oh, thanks. I was bad enough with thousands.
Millions.
But you explained to the reader that they will be introduced to 12 magical ancestors. Now, right. Are all our ancestors magical, or just as, now in our world, there are magical folks and there are non-magical folks? So only the 12 that come through?
No. Okay. I don't think so at all. And let me just address that. If you go back 500, and this is a genealogy kind of thing. Mm-hmm. If you go back 500 years, which is the time of Shakespeare and Queen Elizabeth I, mm-hmm. each of us have about 1 million direct ancestors. Okay, mm-hmm. That's only 500 years back. The number of direct ancestors doubles with every single generation. So it's simply just a mathematical equation. Mm-hmm. So I believe if you are drawn to this work, you not only have one, my guess is you have many. And that's why I encourage people to go through the book month by month, because there are going to be months when you might say, wow, I don't feel any connection to this. I don't think I had an ancestor who was good at this. A lot of my work is helping people just trust the information that they get. And it's a very feeling thing because, I as a Virgo, I'm very logical and I'm very thought filled. But with this kind of work, you really have to go with your gut. Mm-hmm. So if you run into a month that you have absolutely no connection to, don't do it. Wait till the next month.
Mm-hmm. And okay, so the part one, as you said, part two is building your ancestor grimoire, but part one is tools for divination.
Right.
And you mentioned that before we begin, we need a deck of tarot cards. Now, to do this, somebody's going to come up and say, well, I don't know how to read tarot cards. I don't know what the meanings are and stuff. So what do you tell somebody that's not familiar with the tarot?
I know tarot very well because mm-hmm. I've been playing with it for 40 years. Mm-hmm. But having said that, I will tell you, I read the cards intuitively. So if I flip over a card and it shows a person in a boat, my brain knows what the traditional meaning is, but just looking at that picture, I'm going to just go with whatever comes into my mind. So I tell people, if you don't know the cards, don't sweat it. Go with what comes to your mind because, again, you're probably going to hear me say the word trust about 1,000 times. Trust what you're getting. Mm-hmm. Trust what you're getting. Don't sweat it.
Yeah, because I think people are afraid to even get anywhere near the tarot because we've heard, okay, there's 78 cards and you have to memorize each card and you have to do the reversals too. So that's 144 things to remember. And it pushes somebody away. And, some of the cards are very obvious, like the Tower. That's a very obvious card. And there's several others that are. So, people that are listening in, you don't have to know how to read tarot cards. And I've heard the same thing about what you just said. Just look at the pictures. What comes into your head? Maybe there's one particular thing in the picture and just trust your instincts. That's really important.
All right. And Marla, that's why I tell people to be very careful about the deck they choose, mm-hmm. because every artist has their own interpretation of those 78 cards. Sure. Choose a deck that you really feel some kind of connection to. That's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, in the book, I actually have an entire chapter on the 16 court cards, and those are the kings, queens, knights, and pages. And those are typically the main cards you'll work with to identify an ancestor. And I actually go pretty in depth on those 16 cards. So you have a good resource and reference right there in the book. So you don't have to worry about knowing all 78.
Yeah, that everybody's going, okay, good. But yeah, at first I thought maybe you were talking about learning or using the major arcana, but it makes more sense to use the court cards because they're individuals.
And, they are individuals, and they are just like us. They have kind of their good side. We have our great sides, and we have our not so great shadowy sides. And mm-hmm. the court cards, again, in that one chapter, I do get into how if you draw the King of Pentacles, for example, what does that mean if that's an ancestor? It's somebody who was really good with money. It was somebody who probably worked on the land. They were a family person. So I really kind of tell you how to identify who that person was or what they were like. but I also tell you more of his shadow side. So like I'm going to say the King of Pentacles, he loves his stuff. And so his negative side is that, it can be very hard to move him away from, all this attachment to physical things. And he can be, the type of people who they want to hold on to everything they own. They won't let go of anything. That's kind of the shadow side of the King of Pentacles. So look at that chapter. Trust me, it will get you through the 16 cards really well.
Yeah, and you've got like graphs for a better choice of words in the book that explains so much. I mean, I can't even believe that there's so much interesting stuff in there that I wouldn't even think about. And
thank you.
So yeah, it's so if people are afraid of, tarot again and whatever, everything is in there. It's spelled out for you so simply that it's going to make your, going really happy. Yeah.
Yeah. And Marla, you know what? I use pendulums all the time in ancestral work. So I do write a lot about pendulums, but you know what? If somebody just can't tolerate the thought of using a tarot deck, buy an oracle deck. Buy something that you resonate with. I am not a rules-bound person, and this tarot works for me because I've worked with it for so long. If it doesn't work for you, use a different tool. Use a pendulum. Do casting.
I was going to ask you about casting. You were talking about a casting board. I'm not sure I'm familiar with it. Maybe I know it under a different name. So what is a casting board? Or how do
you can make one yourself. Let's say that you want, let me just come up with a good example. Okay, let's say that you want to know which phase of the moon is best for you to work with magically. So, and I don't mean it, you can make an actual board, but for me, it's writing on a big piece of paper. So I will put the phases of the moon, I'll write their name or draw them on a piece of paper. I'll take usually 3 to 5, whatever I have to cast. And, you can usually buy little, I don't know what they're called, like little metal tokens. They're like birds and hands and scissors. And I just take 3 to 5, toss them, and I interpret where they lie, where they land on my quote board. Does that make sense? So, okay. And also, let me just say, Carrie Paris, who did the Relative Tarot, and her website is carrieparis.com. Carrie always has free downloadable casting boards. So in other words, you print them of many topics. So I grab things from Carrie because her stuff's so good. Then I don't have to be, I'm not an artist. She is. So, go grab what Carrie's offering.
Okay. So when they're using a tarot deck, the court cards are there. Now we were just talking about an oracle deck would work. And
yes.
Okay, so I have my own oracle deck, the Witch's Oracle, and I don't have very many people on there. I have, the Banshee, and I have Merlin, and, a couple of things, but the rest of them are just symbols, spiders and wands and all that. How would somebody find the ancestor with those particular type of decks?
Well, I'm going to go back to trust again. And I'm also going to go back to what I said before about being careful or judicious or discriminating about the deck you choose. So maybe your particular deck isn't the perfect deck for ancestral work. But let me just also say, for me, it's like casting. We are very image-driven human beings. And we associate certain things with certain things. So when you said like a spider, for me, I associate spiders with Navajo and Hopi because of the legend of Spider Woman. So you can do it. You just have to be very careful about the deck you use. Now, having said that, I would not do an oracle deck that is all, I'll just say fruits and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing that came to my mind. That's not going to help you.
Right.
That is not going to help you. But if you know your deck that well, which I assume you do, you're going to be able to know innately who you're working with. Mm-hmm. I would actually play with it and just see what comes up for your inner knowingness, which sounds very woo-woo, but it's true.
Yeah, no, I think, I'm going to play with that and figure it out. Because there are some symbols that are very strong. I mean, the spider in my deck, I see it as somebody that's very resilient because you blow a spider web, they put it right back, that kind of thing.
Right.
So there, I guess there is a good way to interpret.
I think it tells you something about the person. You mentioned major arcana. I do use major arcana because, and if people aren't familiar with them, they are 22 cards that are archetypal. And by that, I mean they reference things like life, death, major change, rebirth, aloneness, being the teacher. They are archetypal. And I like to draw a court card, one of the 16, that tells me something about who that person was. And then I like to draw a archetypal major arcana that tells me what is the theme of their life. Tell me the big theme of their life. And just those two cards will really paint this full picture of this person. It's going to give you a rich idea of who they were.
Okay. There's another chat room question. Is there a particular layout of cards that is best to determine who we are connected to?
Well, not to keep referencing the book, but I'm going to keep referencing the book. Every single chapter has different spreads that I created to work in tandem with what that month's magical skill is. So I can't say, I won't say no, there isn't, I won't say yes, there isn't one. I can't say that. I personally use many. So, like in one chapter, and I'll tell you, I talk about working with land spirits. And so the spread that goes along with it is, what is my skill as a land whisperer today? What's my potential in doing land magic? So whomever asked that question, each position in the spread is going to relate to whatever the magic I'm talking about in that chapter.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, to me it does.
Thank
All right.
you.
So I was reading about the land of the tarot, and you talk about meeting the 78 and being able to communicate with the cards. And, communicating with the cards and our ancestors, it's really funny because a friend of mine is just finishing up a book called Tarot Meditations, where each card has a message. And during the book writing of it, she talked about how some of the cards were very easy to communicate with, and some were very stubborn. And it took a great deal of time and patience to get the messages from them. So, people might think it's odd to chat with a card in a sense, or make that the ancestor. And some will say the message of the card is just the message from each card that we've been taught. But, with this book, you go so much deeper than that.
Well, thank you. And I do write about the land of tarot because it's a meditation I've done and I continue to do, because like the book you just referenced, I would love to be able to write that meditation for all of the 78 cards. But for me, it is simply going into a meditative state And personally, I walk into a space and I always meet the Fool. And the Fool always says, do you trust me to jump off the cliff with me? And I always say yes. And we jump, and Marla, I never know where I'm going to land. I never know who I'm going to meet. It is always different. And they are, let me give you an example. The Six of Pentacles in tarot is typically called the philanthropist, and it shows a kind of a wealthy man handing out coins to the less fortunate. Well, I met him in the land of tarot, and there was this really long line of people down the road, and I was trying to figure out what are they doing? What are they all lined up for? And when I got up to the front, this guy was handing out pizzas to everybody in line. And it was like, it doesn't matter if it's coinage or if it's pizza. The lesson that he was teaching me was what I'm offering is a part of who I am, and I want to help you. So it just kind of taught me something about him on a very different level than what you see in a typical tarot deck. And not to go on and on about this, but I will.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you. I went on another journey, and I was going down just a dirt road, and there was a woman, and I tell about this in the book, that her foot was on a crescent moon, and she had a drum, and I asked, are you the high priestess? And she said, yes. And I said, what are you doing here? And she said, I noticed that you're having problems staying grounded in your meditation, so I want to help you. And so she told me where to go in the land of tarot. And so I walked on. And, I also asked her why she wore this crown. She had a crown of shimmering stars. And I asked her why she had that. And she said, to show me that she was always guided by divinity. So these are the kind of like little gems you can learn in the land of tarot, because you go with no expectations. As I said, I never know where I'm going to land off that cliff. Never. I could be in a castle. It could be in a field. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you could be on the moon. It really doesn't matter. It's just being open with no expectations of who you're going to meet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of, visualization, everything. And I want you to, after the break, get a little bit more in depth. I mean, just a couple of steps of how to get started to do that, because people are going, okay. Land of Tarot? There is such a thing, so we'll clear the air a little bit more about it. But, I just really, when I was reading that thing about, we're going to meet our ancestors, and then it got me back to my friend's book, and it's kind of the same thing. We're communicating with them, as beings in a sense, as opposed to just pictures on decks.
Exactly.
It's kind of really interesting, because I've had guests on the show before that talked about runes, and the runes spoke to them, and some people in the chat room, really? Rocks talk? Kind of thing. But, we go beyond just the mundane world, when we're doing this. So, We do. And, and I don't know if we're at a break time. But, no, we got 2 minutes.
Okay. We're good. A lot of people, when they're learning tarot, actually hold the card up and envision themselves walking into the card so that they're actually there with the guy handing out the coins, and they're looking around, maybe talking to the philanthropist, and that's how they dive deeper into tarot, is by actually going into the card. And there are also two decks. One is an after deck, one is a before deck. It doesn't picture the typical Rider-Waite deck. It pictures the moment before the normal picture, and the other deck pictures the moment after the normal picture, if that makes sense. So those are really interesting to work with. I don't use them for ancestral work, but if you're just learning tarot, I think they're fun.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm saying, we're talking about things that some people and me, by reading the book, have not ever thought about, and the possibilities and everything. So this is really kind of, sorry, opening everybody's mind, and using your imagination and just trusting again, here I'm doing it now, trusting yourself when what you're finding out, and just don't, because they say if you hear something, mediums, if you hear something in your head, if your spirit guide is talking to you, the first thing you hear, just leave it like that. Don't start to analyze it. Don't start to think about it. What you hear is what you get, And
totally true.
Mm-hmm.
Totally true. We mess ourselves up so much by second guessing our thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And we shoot ourselves in the feet a lot too. Okay, we're going to take a break. And when we come back in about 2 minutes, we'll talk a little bit more about getting to the land of the tarot. So everybody stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Stirring the Cauldron will be right back, so don't go away. If you end up with webbed feet, remember, you've been warned. Come explore an innovative oracle deck that looks into the world of the wise women, the healers, the seers, the witch. This powerful and insightful deck was created by Marla Brooks, host of Stirring the Cauldron on the Para X radio network, and beautifully illustrated by Anya Khan. It includes an easy-to-read booklet and guide with straightforward, gentle guidance on using the deck and interpreting the messages of the cards. And unlike other oracle decks, each card comes with its own personalized magical incantation that provides energy, reinforces the card's meaning, and helps the desired message to be sent out into the universe. The Witch's Oracle is the ideal divination deck for witches and non-pagans alike, and it works well for both seasoned readers and beginners. To find out more about the Witch's Oracle deck, go to www.marlabrooks.com and click on the Oracle deck link.
Hey everyone, it's Marla. If you like tonight's episode of Stirring the Cauldron and the archive podcast as well, take a look at the show's YouTube channel and check out the dozens of shows that are there just waiting to be heard. New shows are added each week, and while you're there, why not subscribe? It's free. And if you click on that tiny little bell icon at the top of the page, you'll be notified when new shows are available. Just go to youtube.com and then type in Stirring the Cauldron Para X, and the link will appear. Just like magic.
Hi, Barry McGuire here, inviting you to come along with Marla Brooks, and let's start stirring the cauldron together on Para X.
Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks, Thursdays at 9 o'clock on Para X. Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
My guest tonight is Nancy Hendrickson, and her book, The Ancestral Grimoire, we're talking about. And before the break, we were talking about the land of the tarot. So let's talk about visiting it. And, how do we get there? How do we get started?
Okay. I call it meditation, but the reality is it's more a visualization. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you my process, but if you already know how to visualize, it's going to be really easy for you. I always begin just by envisioning walking through each of the colors in the rainbow. They're not watery. They're not, mystical, misty. They're just the color that I can just walk through each. And I do go through them in order of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, and white. And when I step out of the white energy, for me, I am on the cliff with the Fool. For you, you may just be in a meadow in the land of tarot. Again, I'll use that word trust. Trust wherever you end up is the right place. Now, you might say, okay, I landed in a meadow. there's a road. I think I'm going to walk down the road, and just allow yourself to really immerse yourself into that space. Walk down that road, talk to whomever you meet, and my guess is you are going to meet people who are going to be so helpful to you. And if you know tarot, my guess is you're going to recognize them because they love kind of putting themselves in the same position they are in a tarot card. So for the Six of Swords, you'll probably see somebody in a little boat on a stream or crossing a pond. They don't want to make it too hard for us. For me, I meet the Fool and I'm on a cliff. And again, I said this before, he always asks, do you have the trust to jump off this cliff with me? So again, I can end up by a river, on a road, in a meadow, up a tree. I do not know. So that's really how you get into the land of tarot. You might count down from 10 to 0. I go through the colors of the rainbow. It just feels right to me. But whatever your entry process is, open your inner eye and trust where you landed. Trust is such a big part of this work. And, while I always meet the Fool, it's possible that you could meet a tree that talks to you, or a unicorn, or an alien. Again, don't go in with preconceived notions. Be open, because this is where you can really meet tarot characters as actual real people, not a two-dimensional piece of paper with a picture on it. They are alive. They do like to talk to you. And let me give you one other example. On one of my journeys, I ended up with the Four of Wands. And if you know tarot, you know what it looks like. If you don't, there are 4 wands. A marriage has either just happened or is about to happen. When I went there, the marriage had already happened, and the groom's parents came forward to talk to me about their marriage. So I didn't have any of this in my mind. I had no idea where I was going or who I would meet, but I learned so much about the people in that card. And typically you see a bride and groom walking down a path towards where they're going to get married. Trust that you meet the right people. Trust that you hear what you actually need to hear. And again, Marla, I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does. And I'm just sitting here thinking I would probably end up walking up to the guy at the Ten of Swords. It's like, okay, maybe I should take another detour here. Maybe I'm not on the right road or something.
Well, no, but see, I think that happens because, I really trust that I hear the message that is for my highest good. So if I saw the Ten of Swords, I'd probably sit down on the road next to him and, ask, do you want me to pull these swords out of your back, or are you uncomfortable? What happened here? Be curious. Be curious.
Yeah. There's so many possibilities. I mean, that's it. I mean, nobody is telling us anything to do specifically. This is all in our what we can make of it. We don't.
Yeah.
You're not saying, well, you got to do this and this and this and this and this, because you don't. You're just giving us the information to work with, and that's really important. Now, also, in the book, you mentioned that the Six of Cups represents your ancestor card. Now, how do we know that?
For me.
For you.
For me.
So, how do you know what people or how we find our own?
You know what? I do this exercise with people that we pull out the deck, and I ask the person to just go through the deck and toss to the side all the cards they hate. There goes the Tower, there goes Death, there goes the Ten of Swords, there goes the Three of Swords. And once you have I don't hate these cards, go through them and okay, these I'm neutral, these I really, really love. So I'm refining down to the love pile. And then, this is so easy. Shuffle the love pile. Ask the ancestors, what card represents you to me always? Always, not just today.
Mm-hmm.
Shuffle and draw the card. It's really, really easy. That's how you can find your ancestral card.
Okay.
And don't forget that card, because it's going to be with you forever. And when it comes up for you in a reading, I always pay really strict attention to the card just before and the card just after, because that ancestral card for me lands there to tell me an important message. Doesn't always show up for me, it doesn't always show up, but when it does, I really pay attention to what's around it, because those are messages I really need to hear.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now we're talking about part 2, which deals with 4 types of magic and the 12 months. And
Yes.
each month corresponds to one of the 4 types, and each month gives you which tools to work with. So like July is weather magic, and August is past life magic, and March is healing magic, and so all that. So can you explain a little bit about what the tools are used for each month?
I
mean, you don't have to do every month, but I mean,
no, I wouldn't. As I was writing the book, I really listened and trusted what I was hearing, because I really work with the ancestors. And so the tools were really kind of given to me as I was writing the book. And for example, I'll go to April, I talked about briefly before, land magic, and using a pendulum. I know this sounds crazy, but using a pendulum to draw out the chakras of the land under where you live. Okay, I know that sounds wacky. Just try it and then come back to me and we'll talk about how it's really not wacky. It tells you something really important about the energy of the land. So you can, use the pendulum to do chakras, and it tells how in the book. I also will walk around the block, and where I live, the blocks, it's like once you do the block, it's a little over a half mile, so it's a good block. And I'll take the pendulum as I'm walking and just pay attention to what it does. And again, I've used a pendulum for a while. If you use a pendulum, the more you use it, the better you get, the more sensitized you get to it. I can tell by walking around that block where the energy centers are of the block. And I can tell the places that I don't particularly want to be around. It's really, really interesting. So, I always ask people, go out with a pendulum, just walk around the block, have fun with it, go home, draw a little diagram of your block, and what did you discover? And these are just really simple exercises, but the more you do it, you start communicating with the spirits of the land. And there's a coffee house very close to where I lived, and it was in the summer, and I went down and had an iced tea, and I was sitting outside, and I realized this tree next to where I was sitting was trying to get my attention and tell me that I could send messages down the roots of that tree that could go to somebody else who lived by another tree. So again, I know it sounds kind of wacky, but once you start working with the energy of land and with nature, it is amazing the messages you will get. And I know we're getting a little off of actually talking about the ancestors, but I think that you, me, somebody listening to this had an ancestor who was a land magician. It would be the farmer whose crops always grew better than anybody else's crops. They knew how to work with the energy of the land. So I I've gone so far afield of what you asked me. See, I can't even remember. Oh, you asked me about the tools.
Yeah.
The tools. Yeah, and again, I do use tarot a lot. I use crystals. In Sky Magic, the chapter for September, I use finger paint that I just let myself. And this was really hard because I am kind of a persnickety Virgo, is putting my hands in finger paint and just letting my hands go wherever they wanted to go, and then interpreting what I saw in terms of the magic of the sky. Again, this is in September, and ask the ancestors for guidance. If you've done this finger painting thing and you don't know what it means, pull out your cards or your runes or your pendulum or your oracle and ask. The book is letting you dip your toes into 12 different little pools to see where your powerful magic lies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all the little charts and everything for that too. It's just amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, amazing.
Thank you.
Now, the other thing that I really liked was going to ask you to please explain how we get a message from the ancestors from a daily draw every morning.
Well, you know what, I'm not going to go into detail with this, but I have a project for myself, just a personal project. Mm-hmm. And every day I drew 2 cards actually. This is the situation today, and this is what we think you should do about it. So I'm asking every day, ancestors, please help me get better with this one thing. And so I'll draw 2 cards asking for an ancestral message. And it's so easy. They so want to help us be happy people. Mm-hmm. I think where people run into kind of a hiccup is if a 10 of swords pops up. But, the message really of that card is about the old thoughts that keep us stuck to the ground. I mean, if you look at that guy, we don't know if he's dead. We just know he's really stuck to the ground. And we know swords, and I get into this a little bit more so in Ancestral Tarot. Swords are thoughts. Thoughts cannot kill us. But this guy has 10 swords in his back. So if I get that as a daily draw from the ancestors, I know they're saying there's some old thoughts you have that are really keeping you stuck here, Nancy. So what I can do is if I want to know who that comes from, I'll draw cards until I get to a court card, and that's how I do my daily draws. And
every month you have a daily draw, and I just opened the book for July, and so the daily draw is that every morning in July you draw. Your draw is focused on water because that's
right.
What it was to practice, and you suggest that doing something similar with your draws and your weather magic. So draw a card a day. If you know your weather magic, consider how each of these cards can be a guidepost to your own practice. And you said, since I'm concentrating on water, I pay particular attention to the cups cards as well as the court cards and the major arcana associated with water. I drew the 7 of cups, and this prompted me to get out 7 cups of my own, fill them with water, and see if I could read the images in the water scrying. So,
right, and I was not good at it. I really was not good at it, and I think that, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to say, you're going to find things you're not good at, that you don't have an interest in. I mean, I'm really good at sky magic and healing. Those are probably my 2 best skills. Past life magic also, but I'm not good at water, at scrying. So I try everything, and I'm willing to put time into something, it doesn't mean that it is my natural skill, which for me tells me I'm not sure I had an ancestor who was really good at this. Maybe they were good. I'm never going to be good. Cut yourself some slack on it. So going back to your question about the daily draws, let's say that I wanted to ask about improving my healing ability. And I just now, as we're talking, I drew the Hierophant. And, the Hierophant is saying this is a really important lesson for you because I came to tarot as a healer. So interesting that I drew the card that confirms to me, yeah, this is your path, this healing path. So I would write about that in my journal.
It's just, it's really so interesting that it makes me kind of like, oh my God, I got to sit here and read this and block everything else out because I want to read the book again and again to get it all in. But so we've mentioned earlier, the part 2 is about creating Ancestral Grimoire and connecting with our ancestors. And the book has so many layers. And you've got so many techniques on how not only to connect with the ancestors, but equally important in how to understand them. And, to be honest, I can't give a simple answer about what is in the book. Sorry, because there are just so many wonderful, again, layers of information. So somebody said, okay, well, here's the book. Give me a one sentence about what the book is. And I can't because there's just so much there. And again, that things that people probably wouldn't have thought of. I mean, you've left no stone unturned, if that makes sense.
Thank you. And I know there's a lot in this book. And, I know that there are people who are dedicated to month by month going through every single exercise. And as I said, there are going to be some that once you decide this is for me, you're going to want to really dig into it even far more than I've dug into it. And there are others that are certainly less so. But I think what's going to happen is as you start working, and I'll use September again with sky magic. I talk a lot in the book about omens because I think that we humans, if we allow ourselves to walk through life open to the messages out there, I think that we are just, messages come at us like we're going into warp drive in Star Trek with Zoom. So I talk about something like comets, because comets were omens over the course of time. So there was this great comet after Julius Caesar was assassinated, and in England they thought Halley's Comet had caused the Black Death. If this is something that you feel like you read this and you're really drawn to it, you're really going to start digging into sky magic and omens that appear in the sky. I've given people a kind of a diving board into these 12 little pools, and you're going to find the one that just feels the water so perfect for you. It's just nice and warm, and you feel wonderful.
And you're giving an opportunity for people to look and delve into things that they probably would never have thought of or thought maybe they were good at or just had any opportunity to do that to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. And you're going to find ones you're not. I wish I was really good at weather magic. I wish I could, drum up a rainstorm or a rainbow or a windy day. I'm not good at it. It's simply just not my forte.
Yeah, I'm going to go one by one because I'm really not sure. I mean, maybe something I think I'm good at, I probably might not be, and vice versa. So it's something that is so creative. It's really, really good.
Well, thank you.
So somebody, let me see, there's a question here. Okay, she said, she was kind of thinking when you were talking about the Book of Shadows that might be kind of like a book of spells or something like that. So, but it's it's creating. I guess I'm trying to figure out how to put it.
It is creating your ancestral magic. It is creating the magic that has come down to you through generations of your family tree, whether this life or another life. It is allowing you to claim your familial magic.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that sounds too simplistic, but that really is what the book does. It is not a book of spells because it was never intended to be that. It was always intended to be able to tap in with your magical ancestors, tap into the power they had to see if it's power you have. Because at the very beginning of the book, I asked you to write down what is your most powerful form of magic? What do you think it is? And at the very end of the book, once 12 months roll around, what have you learned really is your most powerful form of magic? And you will have learned that at the end of a 12-month period.
Okay. One more question, and I think this is a good one. Do you consider astrology to be sky magic?
I do, and I wish I was one of them. It's really interesting. It's a great question because I just had read the other day about somebody who was a multi-generational astrologer. And for me, a great astrologer is like a magician because they're not just reading your chart out of a book. I know people who can look at a chart and sense who you are. It really is a magical skill. So yes, I do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good. So in wrapping up, time flies by really fast, and I usually ask guests about their websites, and I went to look for yours, and there was a page letting people know that you tore it down. So
no. Well, that is my writing website. My magical site is sageandshadow.com.
Okay, good.
It's sageandshadow.com. And it will always tell you where I am or what I'm up to or what I've been doing. And so I will be putting this podcast on it. The next thing I'm doing is I'm going to be doing a 3-hour, I think I just heard 4-hour, presentation at StarCon in Florida in a couple of weeks called Digging Up the Royals. And it is a 3 or 4 hour presentation on working with the court cards.
Nice.
And because everybody hates court cards. So we're going to work with them and learn how to love them. So Digging Up the Royals. And my next thing will be in May in Canada, but I'll have all that on my website.
Okay, good. Well, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you,
sharing
Marla.
the book. It's it's one of those things that I sometimes just get to smiling when I start reading certain books, and this was one of them. And you can come back and we'll maybe talk about Ancestral Tarot if you want. And
I'd love to. I'd love to. Thank you.
All right. And also, thank everybody for listening in tonight, whether they're listening live or on podcast. And until next time, everybody, blessed be, and merry meet again. Good night.
Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited.
You have been listening to the Para X Radio Network.